I'm going to talk, and I hope that I'll be joined by some of my colleagues, a little bit about the way I look at the last 100 days, and actually farther back than 100 days, the way I look at the last 6 months of what's going on in this country and where we're going and what concerns I have. Now, I want to make it very clear that I'm not doing this to get on Ms. Napolitano's hit list. I'm doing this to just express my opinion. Other things in foreign affairs that he's done, he's made some trips overseas to Europe. Was very, very warmly received by our allies in Europe, and they cheered for him and patted him on the back, but they didn't give him what he asked for. He asked for some help, some real help in Afghanistan. And let me say, I just came back from a meeting with the EU myself, and there's a lot of folks over there that certainly are standing in harm's way in Afghanistan. Most of those are Eastern European countries, but there are a few, like Great Britain, who certainly stand in the gap. But the president didn't get what he was looking for in the way of assistance over there, and quite frankly, I think the Europeans should step up for him. I do support their participation, and not just the participation, as I told them when I was over there, the way we look at it where I come from, that when you're making ham and eggs, the chicken is involved, but the pig is committed. And we're looking for some folks that are committed. That means that if necessary, they will go there without restrictions in their ability to perform, as some of our allies have done when they've gone to the battle areas that we are fighting terrorists in.
The deficit, when Republicans left the majority in Congress, they had whittled down to about $160 billion a year. Still way too high, but the compass is moving in the right direction. Here we are 2.5 years later under Democrat control of the House and Senate. The deficit is now 10 times that much, $1.8 trillion, the most in American history. And that's what worries our folks, Congressman Carter, the most. You know, that we are on the biggest spending spree in American history, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of debt that seemingly can never be repaid. $1 billion extra new funding an hour in the first 50 days of this new administration. And the question I have for me is, who's going to pay for all this? I mean, they realize there is no free lunch, there is no free money. Someone somewhere is going to have to pay for it. And it won't be the wealthy. It's going to be middle-class families and small businesses, our children and grandchildren, who ultimately will pay for all this massive spending.
I was actually on Fox News Sunday, just yesterday, basically talking about the same thing. And my comment then was, well, you know, what bothers me more than the first 100 days and the performance of the president is the fact that yesterday was National Debt Day, was the day at which the federal government has spent every bit of the money that we've taken in. All of the revenue has been spent on expenses, on discretionary spending and mandatory spending, and now for the rest of the year, it's borrowed money. We're going to be spending borrowed money for the rest of the year. And the striking, shocking almost thing about that, Mr. Speaker, is that this is occurring 3.5 months earlier this year, gentleman from Texas, than it did last year. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, there's no way that I can stand before my colleagues and say that I would give the president a good grade on this. My worthy opponent in the majority yesterday, as we always have a Republican and a Democrat on these television shows, said, well, you know, the president ought to be scored on a curve. I guess he meant compared to the last president, President Bush, in the previous administration. And in his opinion, this gentleman, the president should get an A on the curve. Now, He's a Harvard-educated lawyer and accountant, and I think maybe even has a Ph.D. And in the Ivy League, I don't think they give anything, Mr. Speaker, but A's and B's. I went to Georgia Tech, and there is no curve. There is no grade inflation at Georgia Tech, and I hope my friends at Georgia Tech won't get on to me about this, but I think I'm a Georgia Tech graduate. I speak only for myself, but I would give him, at best, I would give President Obama in his first 100 days a C-.
And to me, the question shouldn't be as much how is President Obama doing, as much as it should be how are the people doing? How are the American people doing after these first 100 days? We were made great promises of hope, great promises of change, and yet I was listening over the weekend to the president's man, Larry Summers, and what he was saying. And he was saying that maybe next year, 2010, before we see any shift in this economic climate. We were led to believe that we would see great change, immediate change, and all we're seeing is a prolonged effort.
Thank you, the gentleman from Texas, for yielding and for having this hour. And, you know, yesterday was debt day. After yesterday, we go forward spending our children and our grandchildren's money. We're putting everything we're doing on a credit card. I sat here for 2 years in this Congress, and I listened to the minority, the Democrats then, complain about deficit spending, about going into debt, on and on and on. Yet today, that seems to be okay.
The worst demonstration of wanting to be bipartisan occurred in February when it was announced that the 2010 census would be moved out of the Department of Commerce and into the White House to politicize the counting of the American public. Now, why would I worry about that? Well, because we, members of Congress, are the branch of this government that is represented by a number of people. We have a number of people that we represent. And we divide the population of this country by a number. It's expected to be somewhere around 800 to 850,000 people, I understand it, after the next census. And then that decides how many congressmen and women we get from each state. This has always been been done by independent people as nonpartisan as possible because the count matters. And to say you're moving it out of the department it's been into and into the White House, there's nothing bipartisan about that. Absolutely nothing. The center of the universe of one party is the White House.